We're live, everyone. Welcome to Inside dotNET, right? I'm your host, Cecil Phillip. Here's my co-host. This way. Sorry, the camera's turned around. We have a really cool episode today. Today we have Alan that's here with us, and he's gonna talk to us about one of the projects that he's been working on called Shiny. Is that how you call it? Shiny?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So before we actually start diving into everything, why don't you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
So my name is Alan Ritchie. I have been a Microsoft MVP for 5 years running now. I've been doing .NET for, I don't know, when the thing released, 20 years ago. So I'll say 20 years.
Yeah,
20 years.
Is it that long? That
is, it is.
Great. I've been doing a lot of Xamarin since Miguel launched them back in 2012, maybe even 2011. Before it was Xamarin, it was Ximian under Novell. And I've been doing kind of open source for a long time too. I guess that's approaching about 10 years. So I've been out there, doing this stuff day in, day out. I love the ecosystem. I met Rodney back in Texas. I think at the Xamarin Dev Summit, probably
2019. Yeah.
Was that 2019? See, I can't even keep track of the time anymore.
Yeah, because I know that because it was 2016 Xamarin Evolve, and then we had to wait till 19 to get another conference, and that's the last one that we had.
Yeah, that's right. Holy jeez. Time flies when you're having fun, right?
Yeah.
So I met Rodney
in Orlando. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I met Rodney at that. I think that was in Texas as well.
Yep.
And he's been doing open source. I mean, you maintain reactive UI still, and that's very near and dear to my heart. Love that. I think that's really what opened my eyes to RX. I know a lot of people have troubles with it in the .NET, but I will die on that hill. I will die on that hill.
I'm right there with you, brother. It's great.
I think the thing with RX in general, like RX across the board, is that unless that ecosystem shows like the developers what to do with it, then it's just kind of like, I don't understand it because I can't apply it to anything. Like if you kind of look at the JavaScript one, which came after the .NET one, and how it kind of took off, it was only really after Angular put it in their framework and folks showed people how to do it with, I think it started with like HTTP client, and then they connected it to events, like, and they slowly start to attach it to more things. And folks are like, oh, okay, obviously this makes sense, right? And then there was RX Java, and that was, from my understanding, like more closely attached to like the Android world, right? Like a lot of folks in Android used RX Java. So, but in .NET, like we never really showed people. I shouldn't say we. Microsoft never really showed people what to do with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when folks don't know what to do with it, they're just like, oh, okay, well, this is linky kind of, but sort of, but not really. You know what I mean? So I feel like, and I know Ronnie and I have talked about this a little bit. Like we should definitely cover RX at some point later in the show. But I agree with you. I think once folks understand the thing that they could do with it, then it's like, oh, okay, I get it, and then they like latch onto it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's a shame that it hasn't caught off more in the Microsoft ecosystem, because once people start doing it, it's like you never go back. That's how you do everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I still do async and tasks. Don't get me wrong, because they are easy. They're simple.
Yep.
But for the most part, I mean, if even timeouts, I mean, when did timeouts? I think that was .NET 7 where they actually added a timeout, a with timeout on tasks, right? You didn't have that. You had to kind of bobble this weird code into it, and it just didn't exist. And RX, you always had that. You just said, timeout, give it 10 seconds. And if something doesn't happen, implode. So,
right. Yeah. So you actually integrated a lot of RX into Shiny, right? So
yeah, it's a lot of it has, especially in kind of the Bluetooth section, which I'll talk about a bit. It's all in there because I've done a lot of Bluetooth projects, and it just makes sense there because you've got a lot of data flipping in and out. You're running scans for devices, and it makes sense there. Sure, you could do it with events, but you've got no way of throttling how many of those events come in, managing the backflow. So in doing all this Bluetooth stuff, it just RX made sense. And pretty much everything I do nowadays, because especially in the Xamarin ecosystem, people hook events and then they forget to unhook them. And then you start with all these memory leaks, and it just, I don't know. Even the designer of C# says that he wishes he hadn't done events the way they did them. So
yeah,
that speaks volumes to me, I guess. And so I've been doing RX events forever. I don't really make events in C# anymore. I haven't for many years now.
Yeah.
So folks, how about we do this? So I really want to dive into Shiny and learn about like what it is, and I like history, right? Like I'm a history guy. So I want to know the history of, I don't know, why'd you build the thing, and like why did you think that there's a problem you want to solve? Well, before we do that, let's do a quick round of updates, and I'm going to pull up my screen, and let's take a look at some of the cool things that are happening just around the ecosystem. Now, if folks were here for the last stream that we did, again, one of the things Rodney and I were talking about was we don't talk about meetups enough. And, for folks that, hey, you might not always want to go to a conference, whether it's virtual or, somewhere you got to jump in a plane to go to, there's a lot of cool things that are usually happening pretty close in your community if you just, kind of just open your door and look around a little bit. So one that we're going to share today, and Rodney actually sent this to me just a little while ago, the North Houston.net users group, right? So if folks are in North Houston, this says it's in Conroe, Houston.
Conroe. Yep.
Conroe, right? Yeah,
Conroe, yep.
Houston. I don't know where that is, but hopefully, if that's close to you, there's a whole meetup group here talking about dotNET, and it looks like Aaron Standard, like our dear friend Aaron, is going to be talking about observability for dotNET, and look, as if you kind of scroll through here, oh look, Rodney's going to be there in March. So lots of great speakers, lots of interesting topics. So if you're around and in that Conroe area in Texas, definitely make sure you head over to the North Houston, .NET group. And even if you're not, like maybe you could even just hit the join this group button. I don't know if they do. Do they broadcast their things, Rodney? Do you know? Or is
I don't know yet. So Aaron is trying to revitalize the in person. So I don't know what the whole technical scheme is, but I'm going to be working with him to try and figure all that out. So it may be possible that we start streaming it. Yep.
Okay, so there you go, right? So again, if folks are interested, definitely make sure you check this out. Actually, I'm going to pull up the link on the screen. So if you wanted to head over there, you could definitely go ahead and do that. All right, so next link that I'm going to share with everyone. This one is, I think we might have spoken about this before, but Orlando Code Camp is also happening March 25th. I believe the speaker, all the speakers have been chosen, so you can no longer like submit to speak there. But again, if you're in the Orlando area, this is a free, code camps are free, right? So you could just kind of just show up and check out the talks, network with your peers, just learn some cool stuff and hang out, right? So if you're in Orlando, close to Orlando, Tampa, Kissimmee, Daytona, anything like that, that's 45-minute drive for you, give or take. Definitely head over and check this out on March 25th. And while Alan was talking, I did look it up. So .NET was released in February 13th, 2002. I'm sorry. So yes, it was 20 years ago.
Oh, geez.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So yes, that's how long we've been doing this .NET thing for. It's been around for a long time. So there you go.
It's come a long way.
There you go. All right, so that's enough for me. I'm taking my screen off. So Alan, let's just start off with, again, like let's get a little bit of that superhero backstory, right? What exactly like inspired you to like, create Shiny? Like, what was the problem you're trying to solve, and how did it come to be?
So I've been doing Xamarin, like I said, since that was released. I'm sure we could find that date, but I think it's been about 10 years.
I'll look that up too.
I started writing a whole bunch of plugins when it first came out. There was this one stupid little one that somehow got loads and loads of downloads that did nothing but display alerts, but people used it.
So Alan was a legitimate Xamarin superhero at that point, because every Xamarin project I ever worked on had that library in it.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
really? I'm
sorry.
He
was a legitimate superhero at that point.
That's crazy.
I mean, and it evolved from there. I mean, I went from doing alerts to doing kind of local notifications, geofencing. Holy geez, I can't. There was a whole bunch of them. Background jobs was another one. So these were little libraries, little NuGets you'd plug into your Xamarin application, and you'd hope for the best. And so as time went on, I wrote all these plugins, but you know, the ecosystem evolved, the operating systems evolved. You know, it started as I got into Bluetooth, you needed stuff like permissions. And as you went into geofences, you had to persist the geofences because God forbid Android did anything for you in those days. It still doesn't. Right. So you create a geofence, and if your application restarted, you would have needed to persisted that geofence, or it just kind of evaporated. So all these things just kept happening. Android would change the way they're doing permissions, you know, every other release. I mean, even if you look at it today, if you do native Android, there's always this question, am I using a service? Am I using what's called a broadcast receiver to catch these background events? Or am I using the new cool kid on the block, which is called foreground services? And it's just, that's kind of changed from release to release. And it just kind of got annoying, right? Because you'd have to update all these plugins every release of the OS. And people would be having these problems, right? And as I was developing new plugins and new stuff, I needed, again, that permissioning, that persistence, and I needed a way to evolve these over time. So I kept seeing these problems, right? Like people are having these problems, and I'm having these problems now trying to maintain like 10 different plugins. We started to kind of reference them. So James Montemagno, who's a big guy in the Xamarin community, he had a permissions plugin, and he had this kind of some of the Android hacks in place. But it became kind of this interdependency life of hell, so to speak. So as Maui started, or as we started to look at the ecosystem, and with Maui kind of on the horizons, I said, you know what, enough is enough. I keep dealing with kind of the same problems throughout all these plugins. Maybe it's time to pull all these things together. One, for my sanity, to be able to manage these things and to be able to adapt them quickly with these platform changes. So lo and behold, I decided to make all of these things become a platform, right? When we were in the Xamarin Forums days, and I'll kind of show this with some of the code in a few minutes, is they didn't have anything that really structured your dependency injection or kind of the way you deal with the hooks into the platforms. And again, I'll show it like in iOS and Android, you end up writing all this little boilerplate or hooks all over the bloody place. Like it just bleeds through your project. So the idea is to get all of these hooks into one place. And that's really why Shiny became more of a platform than just kind of a set of plugins. Some people didn't like that because I kind of forced them down the way of the .NET extensions path, where it says, you know, here's your startup file, register your dependencies, and do the things. But I had to force some sort of structure because, you know, people would hook the vents at the wrong space. And again, I can show that in code. And they would just say, you know, if you've done any open source, you'd often get these complaints that says it doesn't work. And it's, you know, it just becomes frustrating because you're like, well, what doesn't work? Where did you hook the event? Can you provide an example? So forcing kind of a structure on the users, as well as presenting, you know, error trapping with logging, that all became important. Again, for the community, as well as my own sanity managing open source, right?
Right.
And it just, and now as we get into Maui, and I'll show this today, half this stuff is now built in out of the stack. So all the people that didn't like kind of that structure being forced on them before, now it's all built in. So now you can't really complain, right? It comes out of the box.
Right.
People still complain.
Yeah, they find reasons. You know, you got to make the best open source these days. I mean, I've learned to laugh it off or just ignore the complaints as best I can. Yeah. But you know, you build these things hopefully because you enjoy it. I didn't go into open source to try and make money off of it. I just kind of wanted to give back to the community because I consume a lot of open source. And yeah, I built Shiny in hopes that, you know, people would understand I'm trying to fix a problem that's common in our ecosystem. And I get that people sometimes, they just want a plugin that does notifications, or they just want a plugin that does geofencing. That wasn't an issue I was trying to solve, because when I found that I was using one of my plugins, I was generally using 3 or 4 or 5 of them all at the same time. So I needed all these hooks. I needed a consistent platform to do that. And like I said, all of that's in Maui now. So, I don't have to worry about 9/10 of it anymore. It just kind of builds in. So that was what I was trying to solve, is all these things dealing with Android. Again, if you're a native Android developer, it's a love-hate relationship. I'm personally, I love iOS. It just works. You never have to worry. Even if it evolves.
iOS has its problems, though. Like, iOS has problems.
What do you not like about it? I'm curious. I always like to know what people don't like about iOS.
So the number one complaint that I have about iOS right now is the fact that it can snatch resources out from under you. So a lot of people don't realize that when you store information in iOS can actually just say, oh, this memory that you have set aside for your app, yeah, it's gone. I'm taking it. iOS can do that out from under you. And if you're not paying attention and you're looking for a resource on the file system, and it's gone, and you haven't protected yourself against it, your application is going to stop working if you're looking for like a specific key, right? So you have to, and matter of fact, Randy Del Rosario did a blog post about how you should actually put all of your stuff into the iOS keychain to protect yourself against this exact problem. So anyway.
So there's no like events that fire that are like, okay, well, you're on a timer. At the end of the timer, we're gonna like reclaim.
They don't even tell your app. No, there's nothing. iOS can just go in and reclaim your memory anytime it wants.
Huh. I mean, it is their device, so that sounds like a very Apple thing to do, to be honest with you. But it is.
So that's my number one and really my only complaint that I could think of off the top of my head with iOS.
That's a fair one. I mean, I don't see those problems as often as I probably should.
You're lucky.
But they're there. I mean, a lot of people complain about the privacy and, how it shelters you out of everything, but it just works. I mean, if you use Bluetooth, it's just never a problem. The thing keeps trucking. Android issues with Bluetooth, I think I've been dealing with for 10 years. I finally found a sweet spot in terms of, okay, I'm going to kind of chop you off at the knees in terms of performance. But at least you're not going to get the issues that you normally do with Android. So there's a balancing act there. But it's a lot of people want to get into these things too, and they why these plugins exist is because people just think the platform must just work. And the sad fact is before Android 8, Bluetooth really didn't just work on Android. It was. They make it look like an asynchronous protocol, but if you start doing things at the same time, it just kind of threw up a fit, and it threw up a nasty fit with an error code. And then everybody would say, well, I don't know how to fix this. Right. So, that's why a lot of the plugins exist, not just for cross-platform, but hopefully, I mean, me as a developer, these stupid Android issues that just were hanging me out to dry all the time. And as a consultant, the great thing about having your own open source is that you can fix it and evolve it over time, and everybody serves the benefit. So that was another key reason for me to do open source, because I built it for me to use within my business structure. And that just, that was fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. So why don't we talk about like some of the things that Shiny actually provides? So you mentioned like you had a bunch of, different plugins and use cases and so on and so forth. And you kind of just put them all together, right? And put them in one bucket, right? So it makes it easy to consume and made it open source and all that type of stuff. So as a Xamarin mobile Maui developer, right, on the .NET stack, and I decided to pull in Shiny, like what are some of the things that it's now going to give me, I guess, like out of the box?
So Shiny's going to do a lot of things that you don't get with Maui out of the box. So kind of the backgrounding experience and the device hardware. So Maui, they have essentials, but it's exactly that. It's your essential bits that's going to go out and, get a location from your GPS, but it's not going to do any of this stuff in the background. And they're also going to tend to shy away from any of the big APIs. Like Bluetooth is massive. So they traditionally they don't want to enter that. I don't blame them. It's a lot to maintain. So Shiny, again, because I've written these plugins over the years, it was easy to adapt them. So Shiny covers stuff like your geofencing, which is stuff that happens in the background. It does your background GPS. So if you're following a user, maybe you've got an employee tracking app that you want to use for dispatching, right? You need to be able to turn your phone off and put it in your pocket and still have GPS following it. So those use cases are just something that Essentials doesn't do because they don't want to.
Yeah.
Other things that Shiny does is, again, your Bluetooth. I chose to go after that big API because I personally needed it. There was HTTP downloads. So if you have like a lot of photo apps tend to offload these photos and they just upload in the background. You can't just run your typical .NET HTTP client, stick a file in it and hope that it goes. It just doesn't work like that, right? You have to work with the platform. iOS has a whole kind of way that you do background uploads and downloads, and you have to work with it. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
It just doesn't
work.
work.
Right, because it just shuts down the process. That's it. That's all. Maybe that was something that Rodney hated about iOS. It's one of those things. You just have to deal with it. And it's actually quite intelligent when you work with some of the platform stuff because, for instance, iOS will go, you know what? The battery's pretty low. This upload or download can wait until later. Or, for instance, it's very smart at knowing when you're going to run out of coverage. So I used to take the train in Toronto every day to work. And what it would do is it would say, you know what? I know there's a dead spot here. I'd start seeing all these notifications and jobs start running right before that dead zone. So it's like it did like this big gulp of air, took in all this data right before it knew it was going to die. And then you had all this content that it had downloaded just so you could continue to use your phone in that time. So it does it really intelligently, right? So that was another reason you've got these mechanisms. Shiny also does what I call the periodic background jobs. So if you've got something like maybe you want to pull that data, like I just mentioned, you want to pull data periodically to refresh your app. People use this. I generally tell them if you're pushing information out, you should stick to push notifications, like send your users saying, hey, there's this new news story, etc. But jobs also helps you do that from the other end. So your device can wake up periodically and say, give me the fresh load of whatever data is available. And, maybe they'll send out a local notification from there. And
so pretty much it's like a backgrounding service. If I think, so I'm not a client developer, but I do a lot of like back-end web things, right? So if I think about it, is it similar to me, if I was on Windows, me running like a Windows service in the background and I'm like, sending stuff to the Windows service to do, or I think like in ASP.NET, there's the background worker that runs in process, but it's in the background. Is it something like that I could just send it work and it does
not quite. The difference here is that you get time slices on a background job, or even say a push notification, you get a slice. So especially on iOS is very finicky, right? It's going to give you about 4 seconds. I tell people you got about 4 seconds in that time slice to do whatever you were going to do. It's not going to give you even a shrivel longer. It's just going to shut. It's going to say you took longer than 4 seconds. And this might be what you're talking about, Rodney. It just, out you go. It canceled it, right? Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So the background jobs, they give you about 30 seconds to do your business. But when it runs those jobs, is based on your user. So it's very intelligent. If it knows, I'm sleeping from, midnight to whatever, it's not going to run jobs during that time. It doesn't make any sense. Your user's not getting content. It'll start running them, like I said, right when it knows there's going to be a dead spot, very intelligently starting to run these jobs to do whatever it is that your user or your program is going to do. So it's like those hosted services in the fact that you have 4 seconds or you have 30 seconds, depending on what time slice you assigned. But really, there's lots of stuff going on there that you may want to do. Again, other things that Shiny is doing is your local and your remote notifications. A lot of people ask, why do remote notifications? The reason is that there's so many ways to do that now. There's Firebase, there's Microsoft Azure notification hubs. It's a mouthful.
Mm-hmm.
There's all these notification services that come and go, but they're really all just stuff built on top of the platform basic APIs. So it just made sense to have it. Why do I need to have all these different APIs that come and go when I could have one? And I just say, you know what, I want to use Firebase today, and maybe tomorrow I want to switch to Azure notification hubs. With Shiny, it's really one line of code.
Nice.
Swapping between these mechanisms. And I'll try and show that a little bit when we swap to my screen. But it's all these little things that happen in the background that Essentials just isn't going to do for you. And Shiny will do them all on its platform. I test the platform once, and hopefully all these permissions and this persistent mechanisms just work everywhere. And that's really what it's trying to accomplish, is just making those background things an easy process across your Xamarin applications. That was the goal.
Yeah. So since you brought up showing your screen and demos, why don't we switch over to your screen, and so we can show folks a little bit about like what this looks like and how to get things set up and all that types of stuff. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, then your screen is on now, sir. So
okay.
Let's take a look.
So I'm going to start with the easiest way to run a Shiny application, or to get it going, because there's still a lot of work that has to happen. So a couple months ago, I made these templates to deal with. I'll put this up. I'll send a link for this after.
Okay.
But there is a nice project here. Hopefully we can see that. I can make the font bigger if I have to, but I'll send it in the chat after. So this became necessary because it helps you kind of absorb all of what Shiny does in terms of plugins, features, as well as a lot of the ecosystem. If you're writing Xamarin applications, or in this case, Maui applications, this thing does a lot. So I'm going to pull that up. Let's see here. So I have already installed these applications. So I'm going to run next. This can go wherever. So this is kind of all of the things that at least this top section here, that this template will do for you. This, you can set up your XAML, Blazor, C# kind of Maui application. I only support dotNET 7 right now. It's just easier trying to support 6 and 7 and classic Xamarin. It's a bit of effort. It's a lot.
I actually have a bone to pick with you and Dan about that, for the record. But I'll talk about that later.
The bone isn't with me. The bone is with the tooling team. Trust me. The hairs I have lost trying to get it to work is it's a little bit of fun.
Understood.
So anyhow, this thing goes out. It has, you can set up your configuration. If you're in the .NET world, app settings is very common. It's not common in the Xamarin/Maui world, but this is there to try and help users kind of shuttle over. If you use App Center, this will help install the libraries and keys that you need for installing App Center. We'll just put that in for now. App Center is a common logging platform, error analytics, all that stuff. Very common to the Maui ecosystem. And here's some of the Shiny features. Like I said, it's a whole bunch of plugins. So we've got the Bluetooth client for your Android, iOS, and Catalyst apps. Bluetooth hosting. So if you wanted to host a local server in your application, in terms of reading, writing, all that stuff, I have a library for that. Beacons. People probably don't remember beacons. I think these have kind of disappeared slowly over the years. But what the idea of a beacon is it's a little tiny device you can stick on something. Actually, Apple AirTags, that's essentially an iBeacon. Very good for tracking little resources. There's no APIs, surprisingly, in the Xamarin ecosystem. There used to be Estimote. They made little beacons and stuff, but they've all but disappeared. So I still have this because I used this in a lot of applications in the early days, and I've just kind of brought it forward. Background jobs. Again, this is the job that I was talking about. Maybe I want to pull some data, run, I don't know. There's so many things you can do with background jobs. Just remember they're periodic, they're not scheduled. GPS and geofencing, again, very obvious what they're doing. Motion activity is a great way for detecting, say, a run, walking, driving, if you have that kind of stuff.
Right.
This is all in one package, but how we wire it is a little bit different. This is the background HTTP uploads and downloads I was talking about earlier. I'll kind of show some quick demos around that. Our local notifications, again, this usually goes hand in hand with, I use it pretty much everywhere with jobs, geofencing, Bluetooth stuff. Like it just, I guess local notifications is pretty much everywhere now, but I had it for years because I needed it. So it's just kind of come forward. Speech recognition, local speech recognition is there as well. A lot of your speech to text stuff. This was more a toy library, but it was really easy to get with Shiny. So I decided, hey, why not? Let's put that in there for fun. And last but not least, again, this is kind of the push notification options that you have within Shiny. There's the full native one. There's a Firebase option, and there's Azure notification hubs. Again, they all do the same thing underneath the hood. They've just got kind of little layers built on top of them. I'm going to pick native just for this one to show how this template wires it all up for you. And again, if you install this template, there's a lot of other ecosystem kind of plugins. If you're doing any sort of authentication within your app, say the Maui Web Authenticator, if you've ever done any MCell or Microsoft Authentication Library stuff, which is oh so much fun to set up. Sorry, Microsoft, it really is a painful thing to set up, but this will do it all for you. And again, lots of other ecosystem stuff in here, which obviously is you know, a whole other stream to talk about. So I'm going to go ahead and spin this up. Now I'm not going to wait for it. I've already taken the time to run a nice project here for us.
I do like the fact that you have these templates though, because for me, anytime like you're starting a new thing, it's just like, okay, well, where do I put this and how do I set this up? And like, what's the structure that I should apply, right? And so for me, like any type of, okay, this is how you do it, opinionated templates. I have no problem with people's opinions. Have all the opinions you want. If you made the thing, you have the right to have opinions. Tell me where to put it, you know?
Right. Well, what this really helps you do is it's not even about the opinions. It's about putting the stuff in that the platform absolutely needs, right? So a lot of people don't, like, if you come from, say, a WPF background or even a web developer, you're like, what's an Android manifest? What's an activity? You know, what's an iOS app delegate? You don't care about any of those things, right? I didn't care about any of those things. What's an entitlements file? What's an info P list? Why do I need these things, right? And as kind of Maui developers, even Maui does a good job of just hiding, you know, what these things do. But the fact is if you want to do stuff like, and like, I'm just going to go down here and show the libraries. If you want to do Bluetooth or you want to do push, you have to know what these things are, unless something's going to come out and do them for you. So, and that's what this template was really, it wasn't just to kind of wire up Shiny. It was more or less to wire up all that stuff that just needs to go in these files that you may not care or even know about, right? And when I start looking at them, so sure, we installed a bunch of NuGet packages. That's not too hard. But when we start looking at, here's an info P list, what does all this stuff mean? I mean, even for me as the developer of these things, you'd be surprised how easy it is for me to forget, oh yeah, I didn't check that box today. And I'll go on and on and on and think, what did I forget today? So the templates were more or less designed for me being stupid and the fact that I forget this stuff. So if I'm forgetting this stuff, what are other people doing? I can only imagine, right? Because some people just want to pick it up and start doing Bluetooth, or they just want to pick it up and start doing GPS. Well, you can't, right? And even when we get into push, you need to now know what these entitlement things are and what they do. And people don't care. And I get that. They just want to pick it up and start working with it. So that's really what these templates are designed to do. Sure, it's installing Shiny, but it's also dealing with all this junk, because what is all this stuff? And this is the stuff, like I said, changes over time. Like Bluetooth, these permissions just in Android 12, they flipped upside down and people started reporting the very next day, hey, Bluetooth isn't working. Oh, it turns out that Android's gone and changed how this stuff works. So that's kind of some of the big things that you need to do with these templates and with Shiny in general, is just be able to adapt quick without having to explain to users, here's what's going on. You just have to be able to roll with it.
Yeah. We got a quick question coming in from Twitch. When do we get the shiny manifest.json so you could generate the native bits for us lazy devs?
Dan Siegel, he's trolling me, is he?
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit. Yeah. Just a little bit.
So I'm pretty sure he knows my answer to that, because I'm pretty sure we've had this discussion, and technically he does build tools that can do that for us.
Oh, so it's up to him to do it then. That's what you're saying.
Potentially, yeah. Yeah, Dan,
Okay.
Dan, you know how to do that stuff.
There you go.
Community driven. I love it.
I think what's been requested several times is that it sucks having to, like, if you do just want a plugin, like let's say I want to go grab any local notification, a plugin, or any push notification plugin, how do you get these things in there with just installing a NuGet? There is no answer to it right now. There's nothing that goes in and hardwires in this Android manifest or this entitlements. It just doesn't exist. Could it? Maybe. I think it's probably something that has to come from the tooling team.
Yeah.
But it would certainly be helpful, right? If you could just install it and it was all plug and play. But the sad fact is that with iOS and Android, it's probably a long ways off. So there's your answer, Dan. Talk to the tooling team.
That's funny. So one more question before I let you go on. So just from my understanding, so is Shiny only for things that Xamarin supports, or can I like put it in a web forms app or put it in a .NET UWP app? I think you can do .NET with UWP. I don't know, but if you can, like, can you do that, or is this only for like Xamarin Forms, Xamarin MAUI things?
So right now it is for iOS. So Xamarin, .NET 6, .NET 7, iOS, Android, and Mac Catalyst. I did originally have support for UWP. The sad fact is that the way that UWP was handled was quite annoying. I couldn't tell if Microsoft was coming or going with it. They didn't know if they were coming or going with it. And then lo and behold, it's dead, right? It took them, 3 or 4 years to admit, like, hey guys, it's been on life support for 4 years. And you were like, hey, no kidding. So I just, people use it, and that's great. It's not something that that's ever come up in a topic of conversation in the business I'm in. So for my own sanity, I took it out just because I didn't know enough about UWP to care. And I personally don't think that WinUI, I mean, there's been a huge debacle between 2 and 3. I don't know if that's coming or going. So it's a very dangerous market to enter. But when we talk about WebAssembly, it's definitely something that I've been working on. There is some WebAssembly working with Shiny version 3, which is alpha, by the way. I'm looking to do stuff like Bluetooth and push notifications in that. The problem with a lot of the web standards, and especially like Bluetooth, is it takes the web forever to decide how these APIs are going to evolve, right? So we're really at the mercy of these what is it?
Standardization boards and everyone else.
Right. And you don't know like when they're going to support it or what they're going to change. You can look at Chrome, you can look at Edge. It's the same wars that, if you guys have been doing .NET development for 20 years, you know the pain that we went through with jQuery and document.all versus document.getElementID. It hasn't changed. It's the same junk. So I want to do more WebAssembly stuff. I'm just waiting for the W3C to finalize some of these APIs so that they're not considered
experimental.
Yeah, they have a flag that you have to turn on to get all the stuff working. Can you imagine having to explain that to open source users? Yeah, you have to ask your users to turn on experimental flag to get this to work. Yeah. Right? It's I'm waiting. It's easy to get there. I can get this in a Blazor app or eventually an Uno app, and it'll just work. But I'm waiting it out so I don't have to tell people to check a box.
Yeah.
But it is coming. I've kind of got it working, at least in Chrome and a bit in Edge. It'll be there. Just go. Whoever you knock on the door for W3C, that's who you have to harass.
Nice.
Nice. Yeah.
Cool.
So,
So now we have this template. You showed us the NuGet packages that kind of come out of the box. So it's like, what's the next thing? I don't know. Like me as a Shiny developer would do.
so generally more so this is a Maui application that we've spun up. I'm just going to attempt to see under my camera here. So now we're looking at kind of, this is what people are used to with Maui applications, is they're used to configuring your fonts. We won't worry about this. This is just a Shiny framework is just a way of bringing together Prism and Reactive UI and Shiny under one package, because I know a lot of people complain about using Shiny with all these things. It does exist. This is the guy, but I'm going to leave that off topic because that's more the advanced stuff for people that are out there using Prism, MVVM frameworks and stuff. But it's there. Yep. So a lot of Maui developers, they are used to seeing this portion of the app. They're used to saying, okay, well, I want to register my page. Let me see where I registered a page here. I registered my main page with my main view model. Right. There's nothing there. It's pretty much bare bones. But all of the services that you may want to use. So I registered everything in the kitchen sink for Shiny. So I registered the Bluetooth, Bluetooth hosting, beacon ranging. I won't go over what that is. That's basically for foreground, telling where a beacon is. Beacon monitoring, this is finding beacons in the background. GPS, geofencing. So there's a lot going on here. Like I said, this is why I use the templates, because we've registered everything. Your app generally is only going to have 3 or 4 of these things, not the whole kitchen sink. Now, the other question I tend to get is, what are these delegate things? How do I explain this? A delegate is a way of registering a piece of code that will run when it needs to run. And it's all registered. It's hooked up to your dependency injection. And this is a way of forcing structure on the user. So one of the things I said is, when I came out of the plugin world, and I'm going to go to kind of a classic app here for a second. Which one of these? So this is a classic Xamarin app. Looks like fun. We've got your traditional plugin kind of setup. You've got an interface with a static class that says current. Doesn't matter how we get this plugin, but this was the traditional way of doing it in Xamarin Forms. And what a lot of people would do is they would have some sort of background event, and they would go into the Xamarin Forms on start. Seems logical. And they would say my plugin .current, some sort of background event, hook it. So me as a developer, I'm expecting that this thing's going to fire when the background event occurs. The problem is that doesn't happen. And the reason that doesn't happen, I mean, this will kind of work on iOS, but when you go into Android, the UI platforms, they never initialize. So this event never gets hooked. And if it does get hooked, it's way too late. Like this has already fired and you've missed it because you registered it way too late. So this was a problem that I continuously had when I was doing just kind of plugin developers. People said, well, it's not working. Like I said, that's the OSS way of saying it's not working. And you'd always need an example, and it would always be here. And to this is logical to users. My application starting. Sure, right. Your Xamarin Forms part of your application is starting, but you've already missed the bus, so to speak. Like this event is fired, you've missed it, it's too late, forget it. And it got worse because people would say, well, it's still not working, right? And 9 out of 10 times this was because people just didn't do, try catch. So, and then log it. Like people just didn't log these events. So it wasn't that this thing may not have been working, it's that they weren't doing simple things like a try catch log. So that was a common thing too, is you'd need reproducible issues, and they'd say, well, it works here. Why doesn't it work here?
Works on my machine.
Right. And that was really kind of the frustrating thing, because doing these background events, people just didn't get it. And it didn't matter. It doesn't matter if you document it. You can write 10,000 documents and they'll still miss this event because they don't understand it. Mm-hmm. And to try and explain it just wasn't worth it. And that is really where Shiny started to force kind of this structure of having like a startup class, forcing the way dependency injection work, forcing logging. Like the logging just comes built in. You don't even get a say in the matter. Logging goes into Shiny. So it'll put all this stuff out. The users don't have any way to hide it anymore. Give me a reproducible sample. I can see what's moving. I can see what's missing, and I don't have to worry about, did you register it on start? It doesn't matter anymore. Because if we go back to this and our Maui application, like I said, we've got these delegates. So delegates are just the good way of doing events in a Xamarin application. So I'm just going to pick anyone here. Let's do a geofence because that's nice and simple. So with geofencing, you've either got, you're either entering the geofence or you're exiting it. It's really that simple. And from here, what happens is this is all try-catched around. Shiny's done that for you. So if you write some code here that's offensive and it dies or it gets timed out, Shiny's going to catch that and report it. If you've plugged in App Center, which again, in this application, I'm pretty sure I plugged in App Center. There it is. Yeah. So I built in the App Center logging. This is going to show up. If this service dies, Shiny will push it to App Center for you. You will see what's going on with it. Now, and again, I don't have to worry about where you're wiring up the event. I did it for you. I don't have to worry that you're putting this in some sort of on start. You just put it in your Maui program, just like you would everything else nowadays. So it's all managed for you. And one of the other things that would often happen, again, going back to the old model, is how do I get my dependencies into this, right? How do I get, maybe you're lucky and you can use another plugin here that's got a static register of some sort. But chances are a lot of people were they were introducing their own dependency injection, say on AutoFac or
Dry IOC.
Yeah, Dry IOC, that's another one, right? So
Tiny IOC I've used. Yeah.
So people would be asking the question, how do I get my dependencies into this thing? And the answer would be like, I don't know. How do you get them in there now? Right? So it wasn't a good answer. So now, again, going back to the Shiny project, so we're in geofencing. The common thing to do here is I want notifications. Let's bring in notifications and hope that notification manager. So this is a Shiny thing. Right, we're going to merge that. I'm hoping that's going to emerge.
I hope so too.
There we go. There we go. There we go. So this is the common thing you might want to say. So I'm going to go ahead. This is dependency injected. I'm going to wire this guy in. And kind of a common thing to do, let's make this async, is go, if I'm entering the geofence, so I'm going to say if we're entering it, let's do send and say, what's an easy one? Welcome. You've entered, now you probably registered geofence that's for your location or your business. You've entered, where'd you guys say you were in Texas, right? So you might register a geofence against a certain area in Texas. It's just going to fire and say you've entered. And you can start sending stuff like this. And now there's no guess of where my dependencies are coming from. They've all been registered in your Maui application just like normal. So this is why Shiny uses delegates and kind of forces the user on this, because it brings all of those pieces of the puzzle together for you with very little effort.
So a delegate basically is just like an event handler, right? So almost like the iOS concept of a delegate or a C# delegate, right? Where I have some function that's going to execute at some point in time when it's time for it to do its job, right? So you register the delegate, and when it's time for the delegate to fire, it fires, and you're good to go. And you don't have to worry about any of the cruff, any of the setup, any of the making sure that the services work. You just have to say, when Shiny gets an event, run this piece of code. And
exactly.
That's all I have to do to plug in.
Yep. And it'll bring, like I said, you can, if you've got your own, say, data management service or whatever, I don't know, whatever other services you need here, they're going to work with dependency injection. They're going to work with your logging. Like it all just is built in, right? It just works. And that's kind of, this forced the structure on the users. Again, some people don't like it, but it's very necessary. And it actually makes this block of code very testable as well. So for any users that are doing kind of test-driven development, you don't really, I mean, testing some of this stuff like Bluetooth or geofencing really sucks. If you've got a device, it's hard. You can't really just run a set of unit tests and hope that they're going to work. It doesn't work like that in the mobile world. A lot of this testing has to be done manually. But if you've got an ecosystem built around your open source, they're helping test it. You're using this in your business. It's getting tested. So it's really, at the end of the day, the only thing I know I need to test in my code is this guy right here, this notification or geofence delegate, because this is really implementing my logic. And it's very easy to mock. It's all interface based. So you know that this is going to work somehow, but you don't have to worry about the stuff going around it.
Like, so you'd mentioned when you first started talking about these delegates, you'd mentioned that like the onStatus changed function, like it's wrapped inside of like a try catch, and that you'll send the logs or the messages wherever they need to go. If I'm building locally, is it just a case of I just have to register a thing that works locally? So as an example, if I like to use Seek, SEQ, right? Is it a case that instead of App Center, I just register a local endpoint now? Because I'm just thinking about like if these errors are firing and like, I don't know, for whatever reason, I'm not connected to outer space, right? And I just want to build locally and not send stuff to the cloud. It's just a matter of me registering a different, endpoints for that thing.
With Maui, so there's a couple things you can do. One is all the standard logging. So this, as kind of a ASP.NET developer, I'm assuming, you're probably used to seeing the logging kind of factory here, or the logging builder. You can add in the debug. You can add in console. You can add in your own logging factory if you want, and it's all there. Now, the one challenge that does happen is if you're doing a lot of background testing, you either have to run them specially. There's a whole whack of ways to run certain background events, like a job, or you have to do it through the command line. For a lot of these things, it gets a little bit funky. You almost need something that's going to log it to a file, per se, that you can view later, because these things are usually happening off the debugger. There is, like I said, there is ways to debug it, but the general user is like, I just want to add a logging and have it go. My best suggestion is if you're testing background type events, you want to log it to a file at the very least, so you can go and review that file when your app may not have been attached to a debugger.
So
does that make sense?
To answer you more directly, like what you're trying to set up with like Seek, the way I do it is I dump it out. Everything gets dumped to a file logger the way Alan is saying, right? Like we go through Serilog or the Microsoft logging, no different. Log it to a file, and then you have a job that listens to it and imports it into Seek on your local device, so you can look at it in Seek the way you want to, right? So like you wouldn't do it the same way you would think to do it in web, because it's slightly different, right? You're running it on a simulator, which is technically encased in, like it's an application inside the operating system. So there's some concerns there. So file logging is the way to do it, and you just add a file logger through your logger of choice and get the information how you want.
Okay. So like as an example, like there's no console, right? Like there's no console that I'm logging to, and I could just like pull the thing up and look at it. Like you said, I'll have to send it to one place and then maybe import that and then take a look at it to see what's going on.
Right. And a lot of these too is you might get overwhelmed with how much logging really comes out of a mobile app. Between all the stuff that comes out of Maui and might come out of Shiny, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming in terms of how much logs you're looking at. If you've ever built an Android app in .NET, just looking through kind of the standard logging mechanisms, you get a lot of information. You almost end up doing like a Control F, and you have to find something that's specific to your project. Again, there's ways of filtering it, but if you just want to look through logs, like I said, you just pull out the file and you can go through that easy enough to find those crashes or mysterious events that are firing.
Got it.
Does that make sense? Does that kind of answer your question?
No, yeah, that makes sense now.
So that's why I generally tend to use App Center, because that's one of those ones that's going to push it to the endpoint for you. So if your app hard crashes, which that should never happen, At least the next time you start your App Center is going to try and push that event to the back end. You can go in the website, see the full stack trace, and it got rid of all the cruft that was going on around it for you. So it's very easy to see kind of where you might have screwed up.
Right. Okay.
Other events, like I said, all the delegates end up looking more or less the same. We've got a GPS delegate. This is going to fire often. So if you've got a lot of readings coming in, it's very easy to pick up your GPS. You can broadcast this to your UI if you need to. We won't discuss that today. There's very easy ways to do it if you're interested in getting that to your UI. I did want to mention these push delegates. This was one that, people go, why push notifications in Shiny? Because it's another very big kind of operation that happens in the background. And there's a lot of stuff that goes into it. There's when I received a push notification. There's when I clicked on the push notification. And there's even when the notification token changes. That's more of a Firebase thing. Firebase tends to change it like an authentication token on you. So these are things that you just need to be aware of. When they happen, that's kind of the whimsical ways of mobile when it's going to run. But I wanted to go back and just really quickly show how Shiny is working with that. So we end up with one. I'm going to actually inject it here. Let's put our push notification guy here, for example. So we've got a push manager. And this ends up really being two events. Tags, a registration token, and request access. So request access is a way of going out with Firebase or iOS and just saying, what's my push notification token? And will the user let me do this? Right? So just one point of access. It's going to not like that I'm doing an await in this, but that's all right. I can get over it.
Yeah, it'll survive.
It's just more or less so I can show it. You can tell I work on Mac most of the time, right? So in here, you'll have stuff like your registration token. It'll be null if the user said no, but you can check, is it supported? A lot of platforms like if you're in a simulator, simulators don't like push notifications. Maybe the user didn't set it up properly. Maybe they've disabled it. They've restricted it. There's so many things that can go on. Last but not least, is it available? Then, we know we've got a token. So the reason I wanted to show this is because this is really all that you need to get push notifications working. But when we go into the world of, say, Firebase or Azure Notification Hubs or any of the other 6 million push providers that are out there, they all work on that one mechanism. You don't need to have this code running wild. So with Shiny, let's hope we can do this. Find my push. So I've gone and registered what's called native. So this is just designed to work with your native notifications. But if I wanted to say, I'm just going to edit my file here, and I'm going to pull in, let's say, Firebase instead. I'm going to change this to Firebase and hope that Visual Studio does its thing and refreshes this for me. What do you think? Am I going to get lucky today?
I mean, yeah, why not?
You never know, right?
Roll the dice.
Cross your fingers and see what happens.
I'm just going to give it 1 second, and I'm going to make sure that I called the right token. So I did call it right. So I'm going to go ahead and close this guy in a second. Or I'm going to just kind of fudge it in here for now. But really, for all intents and purposes, this is all you would be doing, if I spell it right. And you would be registering your Firebase token, and that's it. So this would be how you flop those two mechanisms, but you end up working with the same push delegate, the same push manager that I was showing earlier. It just, it changes for you. So you don't have to go through and change, like, I know a lot of people did App Center notifications when they came out because they were pretty easy, pretty intuitive to work with. So you ended up with App Center notifications all throughout your app. And then App Center decided one day, we're not doing push notifications. So you were like, okay, I have to go through my project and delete all these references, right? So this was another big reason that Shiny went, one, it went to push notifications, and two, it forced dependency injection because we don't have to change anything through our code other than this one line. And I swear this would work. It just Visual Studio is not pulling the reference because it doesn't like to work with this project.
So it's funny that you bring that up, right? One of the things that I hear out there in the ecosystem is, oh, why do you ever need to change a database out from some other implementation to some other implementation? There's no need for interfaces. There's no need for DI. But when you're in the mobile world and stuff is changing every week, I mean, people are spinning up services and companies are going out of business. And like, there's like, I'll put it this way. All the original services that I used when I first started doing mobile, those companies no longer exist, which means the dependencies that I use now have to be ripped out of my code. So, when people tell me they don't have to deal with those problems, I'm like, you just don't write real software.
Well, that's it, right? You have to be able to adapt, right? So if you're writing a one-off kind of hello world app, some of this feature might be a little bit rich, but if you're working on a project that's going to last for years, this stuff is going to change on you, and it's going to change frequently, right? And like I said, new permissions or new platform restrictions are going to come along, and you're not going to want to go in and change 10,000 lines of code. You just want to go in and change one line. There is a case to be made for switching from maybe say native push to say something like Firebase. Like Firebase has a tagging system, for example, so you can put like this notification or this person, this user that's registering for notifications. We also want to tag them as group 1, 2, and 3. That's something you don't really get out of the box from iOS, right? So there's a case you might want to be switching for different kind of power or more feature-rich stuff, or even a case to say, you know what, maybe I don't need this, this Firebase because I'm kind of dancing through all these other layers. I just need notifications, man. That's it. I just want a notification token, and I want to be able to send this user a notification at the end of the day. Quit bugging me with all these implementation people. So that's kind of some of the stuff that happens there, and why Shiny goes into push delegates, because this is a thing that happens in the background, and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be wired.
Gotcha. So Alan, we're just about at an hour.
Okay.
So wanted to ask you if there's anything that you would love for users that either maybe they're already using Shiny or maybe they're just seeing it for the first time. Like if there's one thing that you really would love for them to do, what would that be? And then as an example, it could be, features you want to try out, feedback that you're looking for, GitHub issues, helps with the templates. Like what's something that would be really valuable for you to kind of help you push that project forward?
I mean, the absolute obvious issue that comes for pretty much all open source projects is that if you're experiencing an issue, send a sample. That is the single best thing you can do for any. I don't know why it's something that we have to ask for constantly, but that is really the best way, because we don't write your software. We don't know the problems that you're having. And sure, there might be a bug in Shiny. There might also be a bug in your code. I don't know. That's why the sample is important, right? That really helps us get to the root cause. Give as much information as you possibly can. Don't make us guess. I don't have a good crystal ball. It broke many years ago. So, help us out as OSS maintainers by giving that detail, because that's what's ultimately going to help us get to an answer. And help us help you, I guess, is the best statement I can give at the end of that.
Yeah. And our friend Andreas is here. He's saying those push notification services keep changing every year. It's funny.
They do. You never know what you're going to get with them, or if a company's going to go out of business. I personally tend to stay with the native for the most part, because I've got a way of working around the lack of tagging and stuff. But, everybody's got different reasons, or they might be on an existing push mechanism that they can't just get rid of tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's the way it is. So I work with all of them that I can, and it's very easy to plug in, a third party. I know there's still providers out there like OneSignal that are running push notification services. So it's easy to build into Shiny if that's something people want.
Nice. And so for folks that may want to reach out to you, would you say, I don't know, is like Twitter the best place, or are you on, what's that thing called? Mastodon, or any of the other socials, Discord channels and things like that?
I'm on pretty much all of them. I go on all the platforms. I think I've got my Twitter handle in there.
In your name, yep.
Generally, when you're doing open source, though, the easiest place to get in touch is to put it in the GitHub issues, right? You can't get an issue across in, I don't know what's the character limit on Twitter now, 200 and something
250
characters
or something, or 260.
Yeah, good luck getting an issue or a stack trace in 250 characters, right? So I generally tell people, leave the social to the social and like advertising there. And if you've got a legitimate issue, go to GitHub. It just makes life easier for all of us.
Awesome. Great. And are you using like GitHub discussions or anything like that too? Or
I do have GitHub discussions. If you're just asking a question like, do you do this or how do I do this? But if you've got an issue, a legitimate issue, like I said, sample in GitHub issues is the best way to help me help you.
Awesome. Well, Alan, again, thank you so much for coming on. And for all of you that are still here watching with us, thank you all too. We're going to have to have you come back on at some other point, maybe in,
I'd love to.
In a little while, and show us what are some of the new things that come up whenever you release 3.0.
Awesome. I'd love to. Thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thank you for being here. And for everyone else, we'll see you all the next time we do another Inside.NET. Bye, everybody.